Hey guys, and welcome back to Heart Breathings. So over the next few days or weeks, I'm going to be sharing with you top 8 things that I have learned over 8 years of indie publishing. So some of my top advice and lessons that I have learned sometimes the hard way. And today's tip number 2, which is don't take anything for granted. So this is definitely one of those lessons that many of us indies have learned the hard way. So in a lot of careers, what happens is you build up to a certain level, and then once you've hit that salary level or whatever, you suddenly are making that much money for the rest of your life. And that's the way it works. Like when I used to be a teacher, if you go and you get your master's degree, you're going to be guaranteed X amount of salary increase. And then if you work for 10 years, you're going to get this much salary increase. And every year you're going to have this amount of insurance. And there's a lot of stability in that kind of job. But indie publishing and any kind of entrepreneurial job is not like that. And what happened for me was that over the first 5 years of indie publishing, maybe six years. So over the first 6 full years of indie publishing, I made more money and sold more books every year than I did the year before. So I made about $50,000 my first year indie publishing. And then I made, I believe, about $78,000 the next year, and then $98,000 the next year, and then started making 6 figures in my 4th year. And it just went up from there. But after my 6th year, I made some mistakes. So I built my career based on, the 6-book series that I wrote, one book after the other. And I've talked about this before in some of my other videos, how I sort of landed this strategy that I didn't even know was a strategy at the time of publishing in a single series and being very focused with that. But once that series was over in 2012, I wanted to try new things. So I tried a new adult contemporary romance, which was completely shifting genres. Then I also published a zombie and witches sort of like contemporary fantasy apocalypse mashup thing. Even though the contemporary did really well, it wasn't really building so much on what I had done before. Then I started another series, and then I wrote another book. And so over the course of those next few years, my income continued to increase because I was putting out books that were doing well at the time. But I was also scattering my focus. I was starting new series that took, time to write each book. And it's something I could really go into a lot. But let's just say I started so many new series that I scattered my focus. So I made this mistake. But what you will learn, and this will come into some of the tips later on in this series, is that it takes a long time to recover from mistakes because it can take 6 months or more to write a new book. So, some people are talented in that they can write a book every single month, but I'm not typically one of those people. And so it takes me a long time, especially if I, started 5 different series, it's going to take me a long time to finish out those books before I can start something new. So the recovery time has been very difficult. So even though I hit a peak 2 years ago, I sort of took for granted that that was not a peak. That was just the natural trajectory of an indie career was, you make more money, the more books you have out. And I thought that that was absolutely true. But it isn't true. And I think a lot of us have learned that the hard way. So I really, really hope that if you're just getting into this career, or even if you've been in it a while and you've been lucky enough to see that increase in income, that you will heed this warning, because it is very practical and very real, that there is no level that you hit in indie where it's like, okay, now I'm guaranteed this. There is no salary. So if you make $200,000 one year, there's no guarantee that you're going to make even more than that next year just because you have more books out. There are a lot of factors that can affect your backlist, that can affect how well, some of the vendors are promoting your backlist. There are trends that change. So like, for example, that new adult contemporary romance series that I wrote has sold over 100,000 copies as a series because it was a popular genre. Now, those more emotional, not sexy contemporary new adults don't sell as well as they did in, say, 2014. So I'm just not seeing as many sales from that part of my backlist as I was was a couple of years ago. Now that may change again in 2 years, that, hey, maybe there'll be kind of a revival for those sort of emotional college age stories, and I'll be able to re-promote them and cover them and do some other things that are going to make them sell better. But for now, they're not making anywhere near as much money as they did 2 years ago. And that's not really something that's in my control. I can't control the trends. I can't control what readers are currently reading or buying. And you will see that. You've seen that in trad pub for years and years. And now you're seeing that in indie publishing as well. That, over time, trends are going to come and go. What sells really well one year might not sell as well next year. But basically, what I want you to understand is that you cannot take anything in this business for granted. You can't look at any one factor and say, well, this is the way it is and it will stay that way forever. Not your income, because I've actually, with the way that Kindle Unlimited has been affecting the majority of authors' income right now, I've actually heard more authors saying in the last year that their income has dropped by 50 to 70%. And it's terrifying, because that's an introduction of a new program that we have no control over that has severely affected our income. There are also different changes that Amazon makes, like with their algorithms, or, Google Play, when they took the free books off of their genre lists, my income there went in half, overnight. And these kinds of things happen. Is just part of the business. And so you cannot take for granted that because something is true today, it will still be true tomorrow. The vendors change the way they do things. Readers change what they enjoy reading. Strategies change in terms of how it works. A lot of people were relying on free books as a loss leader at the beginning of their series, but now that Kindle Unlimited is kind of like read all you want for free, that free book at the beginning of your series isn't working like it was 2 years ago. So things are going to change. And really the only thing that you can take for granted or say that is true in indie publishing is that everything is temporary. Things are going to change all the time, and you can be expecting that change. There's probably a lot I could say about this, but one of the warnings is don't take your income level for granted. It's not going to increase just because you have more books. There are a variety of factors that can affect it. So don't think that just because you hit 6 figures, now you're going to make 6 figures for the rest of your life. Because what I've seen people do, unfortunately, is say, oh my gosh, now I've arrived. I've had my first 6-figure year. And they go out and they buy a new car and they get a new house and they go on vacation and they, buy all new clothes and new furniture and they take out loans. And, then the next thing you know, they're completely broke and their income is cut in half. And it's just not a great place to be when you're trying to make a living on your, on your creative energy, because when your income halves and now you're in all this debt, it is very difficult to be super creative and excited about your career. So just be aware that there is no income level that you hit that you're going to be there forever. It can be affected by things that you don't have control over, and it can change overnight. Don't take your fans for granted and think that I can do anything I want to them and they're going to love me. I can treat them like crap. I can not talk to them for 6 months. I can, discount a new release even though they all just bought it for $4.99 and nobody's going to care. They love me, whatever. Don't take your fans for granted, because if you treat them poorly, and this is going to come in another tip later in the week, if you treat your fans poorly and you take them for granted that they're just always going to be there no matter how you treat them, you're probably going to wake up a few years from now and be like, why are my books no longer selling? Because you were taking your fans for granted. You were taking that fame for granted. And, I will talk about this in more detail, so I won't go into it too much, but just don't take your fans for granted and assume that no matter what you do or how you treat them, they're always going to be there, because people do care about how you treat them and whether you treat them with respect. Don't take strategies or tactics for granted either. I see a lot of people popping up in Facebook groups and even authors who go out and teach courses on strategies or tactics that are very short term. Back in the day, there was a thing where you would set a book free on Amazon, and when it would come off free, back when they had their KDP Select thing before KU, and the book would go way up into ranking, and it was kind of a way to trick the ranking system. And a lot of people relied on that, and I think that they began to think, this is my new strategy and I'm going to use this, and they rearranged their entire career and their entire strategy of writing based on that. Then all of a sudden, overnight, Amazon changed the way they do things, and that strategy no longer works. Well, it's going to take you potentially years to recover if you base your entire strategy around that. Same sort of thing happened when KU changed from paying per download to now they pay authors per page read. So a lot of people started writing really short fiction, like 4,000 words, and throwing up tons and tons, like hundreds of things that were really, really short because they were getting paid every time a reader downloaded that item. So they could write a short story in a day and put a new one up every single day and get paid the same as someone who had 100,000 word novel. And so people began to take this very short-term strategy or tactic really and make it the basis for their whole career, thinking that this is how things are going to be forever. But the truth is, they changed that. Amazon finally was like, you know what, this really isn't fair that somebody who wrote 4,000 words is getting paid the same as someone who wrote 100,000 words. So they changed the system to pay per pages read. And when that changed overnight, it boosted some people's income way up, and other people, man, they fell really, really hard, because when you only have 4,000 words in your little book, you're getting paid like 5 cents or something every time someone downloads that instead of $1. So we're not talking about 50 cents. We're talking about almost, 100% of your income, like 90, you just lost 95% of your income. What you need to be aware of, just as a tip, is that no tactic, no algorithm on Amazon, no vendor, like the way their lists work or the way that, even you can't take anything for granted, even the size of the thumbnail on Amazon, it could change at any minute. The way your author page looks at Apple Books and the way they link series, that could change at any minute. What Google features on their genre lists or what genres are being offered, any of that could change. Barnes & Noble could completely fold, or they could get bought by another company and suddenly become like the biggest seller of books. You really can't take anything for granted. And unless you have a crystal ball that tells you how things are going to be, all you can do is take what you've learned and pay attention to what's happening and guesstimate. But what I would say is the best thing that you can do is, when you do have great months, save your money. When you have those years where you're making 6 figures, save as much as you can. Don't go out and stretch yourself to buy a bigger house or to buy, all these extra things. Save as much as you can. Be conservative. Expect that your income is going to go down at some point, so that you've got that buffer and you don't have to freak out and go back and get a regular job or write something that you don't want to write just so you can make money in the short term. Also, focus on craft. Focus on the things that are going to last no matter what, which is that readers are always going to want to read really, really good books. They may not always want to read vampires in space with, I don't even know. Whatever trend is the current trend, like reverse harem. Readers may not always enjoy writing or reading reverse harem, but they're always going to enjoy reading really great books. So if you decide to go for a trend, like I did when I wrote new adult contemporary romance, that was a very trendy thing back in 2013 when I was like, oh, I have a great story for this, I want to write it. But that was a trend. And if you write as great a book as you can and you write to your heart, then it will transcend the trend to some degree. You're going to see ups and downs no matter what, but if you are writing the best book that you can, it will sell longer term than something that you wrote as fast as you could just to make a quick buck. So that's going to play into some of my tips later as well. But yeah, today's tip is really, you can't take anything for granted. There's no one that's going to guarantee you a salary in this business. It's always going to be up and down, and there are going to be great months and there are going to be really low months. And just because you have 20 books now instead of 10 does not mean you're going to be making twice as much money. It just doesn't work that way. So do what you can to build the career based on a solid foundation instead of things that are very short-term tactics that might not last very long. And pay attention to saving money, to understanding that if you're on a high point, it's kind of like seasons. If you're having a good season, that at any moment you could go into a down season. So the more you can insulate yourself from those ups and downs by writing really great books, by following strategies that work, more long term, and by, saving up as much money as you can during the good months so that you can pay to have your next books edited and new covers and new marketing and stuff like that, the better off you're going to be. Because the last thing you want to do to your creativity is bog it down with disappointment that you've now got all this debt and you can't afford your house and that sort of thing, because I've seen it sadly happen to too many people over the last couple of years. So don't take anything for granted, guys. Be grateful for every step along the way, but always be planning for things to change at some point. All right, that's it for today's video. I sincerely hope that you have enjoyed this, even though it is kind of a tough truth to understand. I hope that you have enjoyed it. And if you did, I hope that you'll subscribe to this channel where I share lots of tips and tricks about indie publishing and organizing and planning your entrepreneur life. And if you would, I would love to have you hit that notification bell so that you'll get a notification whenever a new video goes up from me. I try to upload every Thursday and Sunday, but then with series like this, you're getting videos a little more often. So that notification bell will make sure that you get notified every time the new video goes up. Also, I would love for you to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and comment down below and let me know if this kind of rung a bell for you, or if you've had any kind of experience along these lines yourself. All right, guys, that is it for today, and I will see you in my next video with tip number 3. Bye.